Hi, everyone. I'm Annissa George. Thanks for tuning in. This discussion is part of my Community Impact series, where I join Boston residents to bring awareness about their work. I believe that the best way to find solutions to our most pressing issues is by making sure that everyone has a seat at the table. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Sonia Tegblad and Lisa Jacobson from Mothers Out Front, East Boston, for a conversation about environmental justice and their efforts to create a livable climate for East Boston and for its residents. I'm also, just for those of you tuning in from home, I'm doing this off my phone. I've got some notes on my computer, so I may look a little disjointed, but I'm grateful, Lisa and Sonia, for you to join me today. Especially, East Boston is such an important part of my story, of my experience, of my work. And when I think about the work that you're doing, especially around environmental justice for our young people in East Boston, I can't help but spend a minute just reflecting on the years I spent teaching and coaching. And when I was coaching at East Boston High School and for youth softball in Eastie, we practice at Constitution Beach. And I often share the story about, working with young girls. I think that year, when I was doing the summer softball, I was generally with kids from the ages of like 6 or 7 to 10. And we practiced at Constitution Beach, which I loved because it was a little quiet there. There was, it was just a great space. But we'd spend the whole practice looking at the ass end of airplanes. And then you look and you wonder why there's high asthma rates in East Boston. Anyway, so that's that. I'm grateful that you're with us. And Sonia, Lisa, tell us about your work, and welcome to our time.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us, Annissa. Actually, a lot of our team was very busy today, but I'm grateful that the two of us can be here chatting with you. I guess I'll start off. You'll hear ambient train sounds in the background from my 3-year-old. So it's just life these days, right? But I'll start off just by saying, a little bit about how we started, and then Lisa, who's lived here longer than I have, can maybe speak about her experience as a resident here. So my son was born almost 4 years ago. Like many moms, the climate crisis becomes super real when you look at it through a kid's eyes. So it became very real to me, and I decided I just needed to do something about it rather than, just be in my despair. So I heard about Mothers Out Front East Boston and what they were doing to combat climate crisis issues. And so I started a chapter here in East Boston. And Annissa was at our launch party, which is super exciting. And we were happy to have her. And hello again. And you were at our launch party, and we just quickly realized we couldn't talk about anything around the climate crisis in East Boston until we address air pollution and air quality. I moved here about 7 years ago, and the issue is new to me. And I've been learning so much about, lifetime residents who have accumulated health impacts due to the heavy air pollution here. Maybe Lisa, you can share a little bit about your perspective.
Before moving to East Boston about 10 years ago, we were in Jamaica Plain, and it really didn't hit me it took a few months after living in East Boston to realize that it wasn't just that my windows were old windows, that they were dirty from the pollution in the neighborhood, and that wiping down of the soot on the windowsills and on the car and just in and around your space was so much different than where I was in Jamaica Plain. And then after I had kids, it really hit home about what they were breathing in every day, and those trips to the playground and walks around the neighborhood. And when you smelled that jet fuel when you were leaving your house, it was like, do I take the kids for a walk today or not? And if I do smell the jet fuel, maybe I go in the other direction. And it's this whole different way of operating in East Boston.
No, it's fascinating to think about those two different stories. When I was teaching in Eastie, one of the things that always struck me, in addition to the softball, the coaching and that experience at Constitution Beach in particular, but when I was teaching, the noise pollution. So we talk about the air quality, but then also the impacts of noise. And it's something that I've become more aware of in my work as a city councilor, thinking about some of our communities that have, if you live near a hospital, or if you live near a police station or an ambulance bay or a firehouse, that there's more noise pollution. But in East Boston, there's obviously the added noise pollution, not just from the heavy traffic with the tunnel and the bridges, but the airplanes.
Right. And
so you guys have done some work in sort of analyzing all of those impacts.
right. Well, we haven't, but we actually, and yeah, I wanted to say none of this is new. Like, we know about air pollution and noise pollution, but what is new, there's a ton of new studies coming out about noise pollution and effects on our health. But also, we've kind of experienced in the last few years some really new research being done from Scott Hersey, who is an environmental engineer out of Olin College, and he runs something called Air Partners. So he's offered third-party measuring of what we're really exposed to here in East Boston. So we have some new data here. Also, the field of ultrafine particulates and the really fine pollution particles, that whole area of research is quite new. So we're starting to learn about those smaller particles. The smaller the particle, the deeper it can penetrate into lungs and cross your blood-brain barrier. And it starts to just get into every part of your body. And we're also learning it's not just asthma, it's not just cardiovascular issues, it's developmental problems in children, it's depression, it's anxiety. So it can really, we're learning it's related to lots of different things. And we have one of the highest populations of children in Boston, here in East Boston, at 21%, Annissa. So we're really concerned what it does to our young kids, developing bodies and developing organs.
So tell us about what, anyone listening at home today, whether they live in East Boston or not, what can they do? How can they engage in the work that you're all doing? And I also want to talk about this art installation project. I saw you just, I think, a week or two ago, and tell us about that too, because that's, I think, an opportunity to engage.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe we'll start with HEPA purifiers, which
Okay.
Lisa can talk about too. She has one in her home. Scott Hersey has done some research on HEPA purifiers, and they're not all created equal. And we need very specific models here in East Boston to actually protect us from those fine particles. Some of the purifiers only capture the bigger ones, 2.5 and upward. So we have been running a campaign for the last 2 years to get HEPA purifiers installed in our public schools. So that's what we're still going after. We would love them for all homes and buildings here. And Lisa actually has one of these Austin Air HEPA purifiers in her home, and maybe she could tell you a little bit about it.
It took me a while to get on this bandwagon. It was, inside of my house smells fine. It's not like being outside sometimes. And I wasn't really aware of the poor air quality that we had in our home until we got one of these things. And I'm really privileged that I could drop $700 on one of these air purifiers. And there's many, many households we know in East Boston that is way out of their range. And even for me, who has those type of resources, it took me a while to figure out that this is something we really needed, especially with the bad air quality outside, but also with the gas stove inside. Even though we were running that hood, the oven vent over, it really makes a big difference in our household. And when you clean those filters, you really see what they're picking up. It's amazing.
And we also know actually that 70% of ambient pollution makes it indoors. So we're not safe indoors with the windows closed, although it does help, but 70% of that's making it inside. So we think it's really important to at least protect our kids while they're at school.
So tell me about that. So tell me about the HEPA filter that you have at home, and will you tell me a little bit about the difference in the particles that it collects? That you mentioned the 2.5, but this one, Lisa, that you have is a better piece of equipment. And does it cover, does one filter, one machine cover the whole house?
No, typically it depends on the model of your house and square footage, but sometimes you need multiple ones. It depends on your space. Mm-hmm. But these particular purifiers capture up to 82% of ultrafine particulates, and many purifiers just don't capture those. And those are the ones that we're really concerned about for kids and anybody.
Right.
And there's just not many models out there that can protect you against that. And these purifiers, you know, some of them you have to buy. I have a not great filter myself. I don't even know why I still have it after everything I know. But I have to replace it every 3 months. And these purifiers last 10 years with a 5-year filter change. So I'm sure I've spent more money than Lisa on mine by now, just with the filter change. But yeah, so this is what we've been calling for a while. But our art installation, which happened 3 weeks ago, which maybe Lisa can tell you a little bit about, was just, you know, a way to kind of spread awareness about the issue.
Sure, we can see the particles that collect in our filters, or we can smell the jet fuel, but so much of bad air pollution is really invisible. And part of the idea of the art installation was to make the invisible air pollution visible. So our volunteer mom team, you know, after bedtime and weekends, wrote a grant to the City of Boston's Love Your Block program. And we got a $2,000 grant. We did a lot with a little bit. It was really fun. And we built, mostly with Sonia's husband's help, but a lot of mom support too. We constructed 4 letters, A-I-R-E, IRE, spelling air in Spanish, and installed them in Central Square, kind of the center of East Boston. We filled the letters on both sides with living plants with help from the community, and did a sidewalk mural with the help of a muralist that lives right in Central Square in East Boston. So we held that event a few weeks ago. IRE is still up in Central Square with some information about how people can get educated about air pollution and also what they can do about it.
So with the, you know, talking about the filters, the air quality issue, the awareness, especially with the mural and a lot of the other work that you all do, how can we help? Especially when I think about, so sitting here thinking about those filters, the public buildings, the school buildings piece, you know, that's obviously critical and important. Are there ways, and have other communities found ways to help families, especially those without the means to do it themselves, get these filters into their homes?
SeaTac, Seattle Tacoma Airport Community, is the only other community I know of in the country. They have a very similar demographic and problem that we do. They're the only ones I know of that have taken the measures to take actually federal funding to install air purification and noise pollution measures within their public schools. So we feel we're kind of at the cutting edge of this issue, and luckily, and we have a lot of local support for it. Our state rep Adrian Modero and state senator Joe Boncore have both filed legislation in the Senate that we collaborated on, calling for mitigation against all of these issues. So one big thing we're asking people to do, especially if you live in the local community, is, you know, when that bill comes up, that you can testify for it. Air Partners is also developing an air quality app, just so families can see the air pollution around them at any moment and make decisions based on what parks to go to, kind of like what Lisa was mentioning, when it's safe to go outside or safer to go outside. So those are 2 things that we're really pushing. We're also really trying to take care of our tree canopy. It's the lowest in East Boston, and trees can really help shield us against pollution. So we need them. So those are some ways, you know, we're Mothers Up Front is big about, how can you advocate for yourself? And we feel we have ways to do that. And thanks to elected officials like you, we do have the support, and we're starting to get, you know, things out there, legislation and measures out there to help protect us and our kids.
So let's talk. I love the discussions and the conversation and the work around the tree canopy, because it's such a very real and tangible thing that we can do. There's measurements, there's counting, there's, you know, trees on sidewalks and trees, you know, that we can measure, you know, how many of them at this diameter or that diameter. And I know that Speak for the Trees is a partner in some of that work with you. They do great things across our city. Perhaps we'll invite them for another community impact series discussion. But tell us a little bit about your work with them in East Boston.
We're basically just kind of riding on the sails of what they do. Speak for the Trees and Tree East, which is a very localized new nonprofit in the last couple of years. And they just started rolling out an adopted tree program so families can actually adopt trees. It's a very complicated issue caring for our trees. So we're also trying to build awareness around that and what people in the community can do there. But yeah, look up Tree East, and we love them.
One of the actions we've taken together seems small, but it's made a big difference, and it's really fun to talk to the kids about, is the importance of our mature tree canopy.
Yep.
And we've been writing letters when we see those tree hearings pop up with the Parks Department and others to protect some of our mature trees. And it's really delightful to be able to walk by a mature tree that sometimes a dozen resident letters have made a difference and saved the tree.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And I'm going to definitely look up Tree Eastie. It was 1999, 98, 99. I was involved in an effort to get to, can you guys, my camera maybe just went off. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Here we go. All right, here we go. That we were an effort to make sure that we planted 2,000 trees here in Dorchester just for the year 2000, and how when we engage neighborhoods and communities, and especially our young people in these efforts, that it lasts with them a lot longer than the effort might. So it's so important to do that. So I can't wait to check out Tree Eastie. Okay, as we get to our last few minutes, I always ask this question in any of these discussions: if you could change something overnight, what would it be if you had that magic wand? And for me, it's a fun question, but I think it really gets at it often gets us to a place where there are things that we can do. We just, we don't think creatively enough, or we don't, we're too fearful sometimes to move the needle on particular things. So if Sonia had the magic wand, what would it be?
Oh my goodness, there's way too many things. I just watched, actually, there's a PBS documentary that came out this week about the future of aviation, and it actually featured Boston and a local environmental engineer on the future of electric planes, and just the whole issue of how we all benefit from aviation, but the cost is, unfairly acquired and felt. So I don't know, I guess magic wand would be electric airplanes.
I love it. No, that's good. I haven't myself personally haven't thought about electric airplanes. So I think that's great. I love it. Lisa, yeah. Magic wand?
I'd use my magic wand to tackle probably the most politically unpopular thing that exists, which is getting rid of parking.
All right.
Reducing parking, getting rid of parking maximums, using
or minimums, probably.
Yes.
Parking minimums.
Yes, getting rid of, thank you. Building more housing where we have surface parking lots, putting in more parks where we have surface parking lots, doing anything we can to improve transit, walking, and biking, and have less parking, less pollution in our neighborhood and in the state, because transportation is the highest contributor to climate change in the state.
Here, here.
That's good. Here we go. All right. Well, I appreciate the two of you spending time with me this afternoon and really just getting down to business, and also identifying not just the work that you're doing, but how you're doing it in partnership with a few other really great organizations. So I'm grateful for the two of you. Thanks for taking the time to talk about your work. That's, Mothers Out Front in East Boston, really doing some special things. So I'm grateful for the two of you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, you too. Thanks for what you do.